Good afternoon, everyone. It's Lady Saoirse here today to talk to you about a British classic, Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. Now I'm going to drop that accent. So sorry about that. Don't know what came over me. So anyway, Northanger Abbey was published in 1818, but that's not what I was going to tell you first. First, I wanted to say Jane Austen lived from 1775 to 1817, and interestingly, Charlotte Bronte was born in 1816, so they actually only existed for about a year at the same time. And I just find that interesting because so many people compare them, or they say I like Bronte more than Austen, and they're not even from the same time. Jane Austen she was born in the Regency era, and, well, Charlotte Bronte was too, but she grew up in the Victorian era. We really think of Charlotte Bronte as being Victorian. Anyway, I tried to do a Regency look for you today. My mom was like, I didn't know Bridgerton was a book. I'm like, I'm not doing Bridgerton, I'm doing Northanger Abbey, but that's good that you noticed that it was the same era. I'm very pleased with that. So anyway, Jane Austen, she didn't publish this. This was published posthumously in 1818, so she died in 1817. Her brother Henry published this and Persuasion after her death. And this was originally titled Susan, and she sold it to a publisher. I read somewhere that it was the first book she wrote, and not entirely sure if that's true, but you can tell it's definitely an earlier work. She sold it to a publisher, and then they didn't publish it, and then they sold it back to her. So, then it just didn't get published during her life. She renamed it Catherine, and then when Henry published it, he called it Northanger Abbey. So, right, let me just read you the back of this to give you an idea of what it's about if you haven't read it. And I should say this is the third Austen book that I've read. I read Emma first and then Sense and Sensibility. I actually read Sense and Sensibility while I was on the Appalachian Trail, so like I had one of those little tiny flip-back books, and I was reading it in my little tent every night. And then I sent it home when I was done with it. Just a fun fact. So, Northanger Abbey. A wonderfully entertaining coming-of-age story, Northanger Abbey is often referred to as Jane Austen's Gothic parody. Decrepit castles, locked rooms, mysterious chests, cryptic notes, and tyrannical fathers give the story an uncanny air, but one with a decidedly satirical twist. The story's unlikely heroine is Catherine Moreland, a remarkably innocent 17-year-old woman from a country parsonage. While spending a few weeks in Bath with a family friend, Catherine meets and falls in love with Henry Tilney, who invites her to visit his family estate, Northanger Abbey. Once there, Catherine, a great reader of Gothic thrillers, lets the shadowy atmosphere of the old mansion fill her mind with suspicions. What is the mystery surrounding the death of Henry's mother? Is the family concealing a terrible secret within the elegant rooms of the Abbey? Can she trust Henry, or is he part of an evil conspiracy? Catherine finds dreadful portents in the most prosaic events, until Henry persuades her to see the peril in confusing life with art. Kind of gives away a lot, but like that's what always happens with these classics. And I must say up front, this is the Barnes & Noble Classics edition. Whatever you're reading, don't read the intro first if it's a classic, because they always give away the entire plot. The intro of this book, thank goodness I didn't read it, gives like plot point by plot point everything that happens in the book. I hate that. And even the notes, because there are a lot of things that are like archaic in here, and actually I found the notes a little bit insulting. It explained certain things that are like, why wouldn't we know that? Like, we're not that stupid. But even the notes had spoilers in them, so just be careful, okay? So, I really liked the sound of this because I was like, oh, a Gothic parody. Maybe that'll be interesting. I hadn't really read much like that. I would say, isn't Frankenstein and Dracula, that's Gothic, is it not? I took a whole class on this in college. It was years ago. And I loved those books, so I thought I might really like this. Well, let's just talk about it a little bit. So a big theme in this book is novels. Novels weren't exactly a big thing. They were becoming a big thing, but they weren't what they are now. People read histories, people read things that made them look fancy and sound fancy to their fancy friends. So a novel was a bit of an embarrassment. If you were reading a novel, you didn't want to really tell that to most of society. So there's this one bit in here. And what are you reading, miss? Oh, it is only a novel, replies the young lady, while she lays down her book with affected indifference or momentary shame. It is only Cecilia or Camilla or Belinda, or, in short, only some work in which the greatest powers of the mind are displayed, in which the most thorough knowledge of human nature, the happiest delineation of its varieties, the liveliest effusions of wit and humor are conveyed to the world in the best chosen language. So that's Jane Austen being a bit fun there and saying it's only a novel, right? It's only all of these things that are integral to our experience as humans, and it's only, art. So I liked that. But the fact that the whole book is kind of making that point, it's just a little bit like, I don't need to hear it over and over. But it is a pretty short book. It's one of her shorter ones. Next thing I want to read. All have been, or at least all have believed themselves to be, in danger from the pursuit of someone whom they wish to avoid, and all have been anxious for the attentions of someone whom they wish to please. So I just like when I'm reading classic literature that's from hundreds of years ago, when I read things like that are so relatable today. Haven't we all had feelings for somebody that wanted nothing to do with us? And haven't we all had to politely turn down people who are interested who we don't have any interest in? And isn't it frustrating how those things never match up? It's never the ones that we like who like us back. So I just thought that was funny. Even back then, they had the same problems. The person, be it gentleman or lady, who has not pleasure in a good novel must be intolerably stupid. So there's another little jab at people who put down novels and novel reading. Okay, so the guy that we're supposed to be into in this book, Henry Tilney, I don't know, I haven't looked up a bunch of reviews and seen what other people think of this book. I just looked on Goodreads, a lot of people rate it 5 stars, and maybe I don't get it, but this Henry guy, I find him to be not pleasant. He's kind of a jerk, and yet Catherine Moreland is obsessed with him, and trust me, girl, I get it. I've been there. I understand. You see somebody, he's handsome, and you're just like, that one, I want that one, I'm into him. No matter how mean he is to me, I'm still gonna be into him. I just have decided that. But he sucks. He says at one point, Miss Moreland, no one can think more highly of the understanding of women than I do. In my opinion, nature has given them so much that they never find it necessary to use more than half. Is that supposed to be funny? I don't know. A lot of people talk about Jane Austen's humor, and sure, he's maybe joking, but there's a certain point where your joking becomes negging and it's just unpleasant, and I don't want to be around you, and I don't want to hear your nasty opinions of women that are veiled as jokes, Henry. So thank you, but no thank you. Pass. There's this poor kid, Johnthorpe, who is the brother of Catherine's friend Isabella, and he is very into Catherine, but of course she only has eyes for the person who doesn't want her. I get it. So Thorpe is trying to hear from Catherine if she's excited, looking forward to seeing him again. He says, I hope, Miss Moreland, you will not be sorry to see me. And she says, oh dear, not at all. There are very few people I am sorry to see. Company is always cheerful. I see what you're doing. I mean, how many times in a text have we had to do that same thing? Oh yeah, it would be super fun. Ha ha ha, who's going? And it's just, yeah. Turning someone down and being turned down, not fun, and not easy, and not easy to communicate what you're trying to say when what you want to say is unpleasant. Hey, kitty, kitty, kitty. You can't even see her. There she is. Okay. You know, honey. What are we going to look at now? Oh yeah, that was on my notes I wrote, trying to give a guy a hint. Okay, I don't have too much to say about this book, so we're moving right along here. She cared for no furniture of a more modern date than the 15th century. I just liked that line because Catherine is so obsessed with history and like the idea of going to an abbey and being in this place that's all mysterious and dark and spooky and I totally get it. Like, I romanticize things that are not a part of my life. I romanticize history. Excuse me. How scandalous. Feeling saucy. So yeah, I just liked that. And it reminded me of a line from a Death Cab song. She may be young, but she only likes old things. Blah, blah, blah. What is that from? Monday Morning, I think. Okay. 188. Okay, charming as were all Mrs. Radcliffe's works, and charming even as were the works of all her imitators, it was not in them perhaps that human nature, at least in the Midland counties of England, was to be looked for. Of the Alps and Pyrenees, with their pine forests and their vices, they might give a faithful delineation, and Italy, Switzerland, and the south of France might be as fruitful in horrors as they were there represented. So here I'm thinking, like, I'm not sure if Austen is trying to actually take that opinion that that the places, that the Gothic stories that are written about places in continental Europe are really accurate, and when the English try to do it, it's just a little bit silly because they just don't have that kind of a vibe in their country. It's much more light and subdued and, you know, tea time and the countryside, whereas she's exoticizing, is that a word? The places like Italy and Switzerland, where I'm sure, let's say Catherine is picturing, you know, dark and spooky castles and stuff like Dracula, if you will. So, it's hard to tell if this is Catherine's thought or if this is Austen's thought. But Austen is always making fun of her characters constantly, so I'm assuming it's just her saying that Catherine's coming around to the idea that perhaps, like, thinking of Northanger Abbey as this Gothic romantic place was flawed, but she still thinks that it's not flawed when you talk about continental Europe that way, which of course is problematic. Because, yeah, just because it's foreign doesn't mean it's suddenly suited to a Gothic romance. Okay. Couple more. So, Catherine, once she's at Northanger Abbey, she's kind of over it after a while, when she realizes that she shouldn't be confusing art with real life, which, don't we all do that? I do that quite a bit. I really would love for life to be as romantic as a novel. And I think it can be if we just allow it to be. You know, we put too much importance on things that aren't that important because we're all going to be dead soon. So why not have a little fun and romance and stop being so practical all the time? I don't know. Unpopular opinion, maybe. So she says, ugh. What a revolution in her ideas, she who had so longed to be in an abbey. Now there was nothing so charming to her imagination as the unpretending comfort of a well-connected parsonage. And that is just an example of the grass is always greener. And I, you know, always wanted to move to the UK. And when I did, and I lived in Scotland for a year, I desperately wanted to be back in Florida, or just the United States in general. Giant grocery stores and restaurants where they give you so much food you will never be able to finish it and you'll have leftovers for 3 days. You know, diners where they call you darling and honey and lots of problematic people that you just have to shake your head at. But the UK has its problematic people as well, I learned. So I was romanticizing this place that actually is just a real place where people pay bills and have issues just as we would in life anywhere. So my point is, I'm back here now in the States, and I'm already romanticizing the UK again, and I want to go back there, and I always wanted to live in London, and I wish I'd done that. So I'm just like imagining that, even though I know it's not, it's not the end all be all. It's not really a fairy tale. It's a real place with real people who struggle too. But I just like, that turnaround in Catherine, that she couldn't think of anything but this romantic setting, and then, she's quite happy to go back to her little parsonage. Okay, so here's my thing, and I know I just said like you shouldn't compare the Brontes and Austen because they're not even in the same era, and they're not trying to do the same thing with their writing. I think people just conflate them because they're from the same century, sort of, and they're both old and they're both women who didn't have their name like published on their books, who of course struggled with the fact that people didn't want women to be writers, but they're not the same writers at all. Still, I can't help it thinking how like Austen's writing is very straightforward, and well, that being said, because it is earlier than the Brontes, a lot of it is kind of like just convoluted sentences that are that surely would have been easier to read back then, but for a modern audience it's a little bit difficult to get through the sentence structure, whereas I feel with the Brontes it's a little bit easier. It's becoming more modern. But so anyway, I'm just, how obsessed I am with beautiful writing. I didn't pick a single sentence out of here that I thought like, that's stunning, that's beautiful. She just doesn't do that for me. She does this satire, which I guess is just not really my thing. But so she says this one thing, there is a great deal of good sense in all this, but there are some situations of the human mind in which good sense has very little power. And I feel like that's supposed to be this, oh man, I see what you're saying moment. And I just don't think it's very profound. There's not a lot that is very profound to me in the 3 books that I've read by Jane Austen. But I know so many people swear by her, they love her so much, and like I want to love her as much as you do, I swear I do, and I've got nothing against her. It's just not my kind of powerful writing, I'm much more dramatic than that. She's a little more laid back. I'm way more like, maybe I am like Catherine Moreland, like give me the romance and I want the despair and the loneliness and the sorrow, and I want the windswept moors and all that, not really the like parlor dramas and that sort of thing. Anyway, but everything is not for everyone, and that's okay. I enjoyed Emma and Sense and Sensibility more than this one, but I never enjoy that her characters are almost all unlikable, and she's always making fun of them, and it's very hard to sympathize with them. I really need to see myself in a character and their struggles to connect to them, but since she's always making fun of them, I just kind of like don't connect with them. Okay, here's a little spoiler here, so skip ahead a minute if you don't want it, but it's about Henry. Okay. Though Henry was now sincerely attached to her, Catherine, though he felt and delighted in all the excellencies of her character and truly loved her society, I must confess that his affection originated in nothing better than gratitude, or, in other words, that a persuasion of her partiality for him had been the only cause of giving her a serious thought. It is a new circumstance in romance, I acknowledge, and dreadfully derogatory of a heroine's dignity, but if it be as new in common life, the credit of a wild imagination will at least be all my own. So I thought that was very sad. Like, it's neatly tied up with a bow that they end up together in the end, even though like nothing would suggest that because he sucks. And it's just silly, but it's sad in that like he doesn't even like her except for the fact that she likes him, and oh, how many of us have been in that situation where you cannot tell if somebody is into you simply because you're into them, or vice versa. Like sometimes you end up liking somebody because they're giving you attention and you think, hey, maybe this is love. But yeah, that's just such a bummer, isn't it? That, like, this is not a very romantic romance. So yeah, I'm not generally into her style of humor or satire. I prefer like real feeling, not like making fun of feelings. And when I say real feeling, you know, maybe I know there's people out there who are like, oh, the Brontes are just ridiculous and overdone and whatever. But listen, maybe that's my thing. I don't know. I just feel like, but I don't really like, I don't like when things are super overdone. I like when things are sad. Maybe I should just say it like that. I like when things are like real life, and real life is very tumultuous, and yeah. And I just don't feel like I've gotten that from her books yet. I will still read the rest of them. I do have, oh, they're over there. I do still have Pride and Prejudice and Persuasion and Mansfield Park, which I promise I will read. But yeah, if you have a favorite Jane Austen book, or I would love to hear what you love about her, what about her writing speaks to you, because it's really interesting to see how different readers respond to different writing. I mean, there really is something out there for everyone. So that being said, I think I will sign off here, and I've already started my next book. I won't tell you what it is, but if you follow me, you'll see. And I'll just tell you it's true crime. You know how I like to alternate between classics, true crime, memoir, modern fiction. Mix it up a little bit, you know? So I won't go back into my English accent, but maybe someday I'll do my Scottish accent for you. We'll see. Thank you so much for watching, and happy reading, everyone.